developing an amazing plan of action today here at the Jordan Ranch. Can't wait. So excited that you joined us. See you in just a few. Well, good morning to all of our friends. Thank you so much for tuning into the Operation Echo Stop Live podcast. Here we are in Texas on our road trip, and we are joined by an amazing few guests today, 2 guests, and my good friend Kurt over here.
As always. How's it going, man? You doing all right?
I'm feeling excellent, actually, and I'm so
warm
excited.
in Texas, though, right?
But you know what? If we're not going to turn the heat on, what are we really going to do? So I'm excited to be here in Texas. We've been traveling through. We were in Katy, and now we're out here at the Jordan Ranch, and I want to introduce some of our guests, or actually let you introduce yourself. So, sirs, I'm going to let you take the mic here and kind of just tell us who you are and a little bit about what you do, and we'll get a conversation going.
Okay, thanks. Thanks both of you guys for bringing us on and coming all the way out to Schulenburg, Texas. Where Jordan Ranch is. Wildly famous place. And so we've actually had this ranch here now for going on 15 years. And Frank Manzano is with me today. I asked him to be with me as a pastor and manager of this facility for the full 14 years. Had 140,000 people go through 22 bedrooms, and it's all ministry faith-based. And that because we had a need, and that's kind of what our ministry does. We see a need and we fill it. And so my name is G.F. Watkins, and I'm the founder of Powerhouse Church and Jordan Ranch and some other stuff. But let's talk about this stuff now.
Let's get at it, Jeff. Let's get at it. You know, we've been talking prior to starting, but we've been talking about just manhood. This is what you do. This is what you guys do at the Jordan Ranch. You bring young people out here every year, hundreds if not thousands at a time, and you teach them those principles of manhood, biblical manhood, because we do know that there are 2 different definitions, one that the world defines men as and one that God defines men as. Yeah. You know, we talk about also just the issues in society today. And Kevin, you add to this, please. We talk about what's missing. You know, we see such dysfunction in the world, in our communities. What's the missing element that people, in your opinion, are failing to discuss?
Great question, Frank. You want to go first?
No.
No? All right. Well, you know, it'd be easy to say real men. But, you know, the question still begs, you know, God asked the question, Adam, where are you? Adam means man. And he wasn't talking about a physical sense, though he was. He was talking about real manhood. What are men? I wrote a book called The Alpha Male and the Women That Get Them. And in there we distinguish what is a man. A man is someone that wants to lead. A man is sacrificial. If you can't give him something to die for, he don't want to be in it. That's a real man. And we need real men that are sacrificial and heroic. Heroes are men who act in a moment on a need greater than themselves. Those are the men that we need today that are sacrificial. That's in time, talent, and treasure. I mean, who do you recruit into the military service? Young men trying to prove themselves, right? They're willing to go to the front.
That's right.
To die for anything. Well, that's what we need in the world, but especially in Christianity. Because in our churches today, which are full of women, thank God for women being there, but the men are supposed to go to church and go home and teach their families. That should be happening today. We're here at Jordan Ranch trying to do something instead of just say something, trying to be what we say. And so we've established what many people are calling the epicenter of biblical manhood. We have Intense Men, the largest father-son gathering in the United States. We have Manhood University, the only manhood university in the United States and in the world that we know of. It deals strictly with being a man. And it doesn't matter if you're 17 or 70. We have a ministry for you. And then also we're sitting in the Manhood Hall of Honor, the only one in the world. So we're putting into action what people are talking about. So my dad told me, he said, either put up or shut up. That's kind of where we're at today. And we need more men to get on that bandwagon.
That's powerful. And we're not just talking about men, but we're talking about men in how they fit into the solution. And what I really like about this conversation is, and we talked about this kind of before we went on the air here, we're talking about solutions. These are practical things that can be implemented, practical places that men can show up to receive that mentorship, to receive that guidance, right? And so, Pastor, I'll ask you, in your experience, obviously I know what we pray for, hopefully, a redemption and a revival of men in the church, but also our communities. But what have you seen over the past, let's say, decade or so? How is what we're doing here really birthed all of these new ideas? Because I hear you speaking of so many cool ideas, and I'd love to go into each one of them. But just generally, I mean, how do you?
Yeah, I think I want to backtrack a little bit, Curtis. You said the missing component, and I think one of probably the biggest missing component is godly fathers. Is that before COVID, the plague of our world was fatherlessness. And so that plague continues to haunt us to this very day. And, my wife and I, we're in the school system. We go to the local high school once a week, and we teach at-risk students. I have a group of at-risk boys. She has a group of at-risk girls.
A great program.
And none of these kids have fathers at home. They don't have father figures. They don't have aunts and uncles. And so that's just in our backyard. And so when you don't have a godly father at home, you have a vacuum that's in the home, and then that home is filled with dysfunction. So I had a dad at home, and he wasn't a godly man, but he was a hard worker. He provided for our family, put food on the table, but you can't teach what you don't know. So he wasn't able to teach me about any of the things of God. And so we grew up in a dysfunctional home, and what happens is when you grow up in a dysfunctional home, then you don't know you're in dysfunction until you're put into a different environment. It's kind of like a fish in water. The fish doesn't know it's in water until you pull it out of the water. And so for me, that different environment was Powerhouse Church when I got there. My wife and I, we attended there 18 years ago. And that's really where this journey started. Going back to your question, Kevin, well, for me, the challenge was I saw the way Pastor GF treated his family, the other leaders in the church treated their family, and I knew that I was missing something. I knew that there were things that I wasn't doing with my wife and children. And so because of that ministry, building men and raising sons, that's one of our pillars at Powerhouse Church. So I'm a product of that ministry. And that's where everything else stems from, because we have this facility called Jordan Ranch where our vision is to build leaders and restore families. And so out of that vision has come Intense Men, which is the largest, men's camp out, probably in Texas, but probably in the United States. And then also Manhood University, and then this Hall of Honor as well.
Can I say this real quick?
Sure.
Frank's very humble. No, he is. Yeah. He is, but he runs the whole show. He fills it, funds it, does all of that, and he's kind of behind the scenes, but he does an excellent job in marriage ministry, and also he mentors young men. We've known each other 17, 18 years, so that's not light. Right. He's one of the top 4 guys that I have out of the hundreds of guys that I mentor. Mm-hmm. But the point I want to make is that what he was talking about in fatherlessness, yes, that's all true, and we have those statistics, and you've heard them before, and they're true. But we took the next step, and that's what I want to encourage listeners to do today, men especially. You're men of action. That's why boys don't sit in the classroom very well. They don't. They want to get up and go play. They want to go out and be a warrior. Girls sit wonderfully. They give us drugs, but they take ADHD, they call that. Just send them on a few laps, and they're fine. But what Frank and I and Robert have done with this place is make it something that works for the local school district. That's what he just skipped over real quick. But they've taken him and his wife and some of the staff go into the school every week, and they mentor kids for the past.
Been doing it for 7 years.
7 years. Now they just worked. Check this out. They just worked a deal with the local school district to have those kids come out here and learn how to run a hotel. Wow. Basically, how to cook, how to change. So we're in the community. That's what we need men to do.
And you bring up a valuable point, and when I was listening to Frank say for just a second there, you don't know you're in a dysfunctional family till you're out of the dysfunctional family. If we were to take that a step further and listening to what you just spoke on, which is a immensely adept point, is how do we know we're in a dysfunctional community, right? because, as we travel around and we go different places, we see that there's different pieces of the community that are falling apart, and we know that manhood is part of it. And so you guys are coming at the root problem. Like, let's just get right to the root problem. That's why a call to action is so important, because you're not just doing something important, you're doing something that fixes the root problem. But how do we recognize, so if we have viewers that are watching going, well, everything's fine in my neighborhood, but yet, while they sleep at night, there's slowly a degradation of sort of the life of the community, and it becomes dysfunctional. How important is it, whether you feel like you come from a troubled home or you have the ability from an untroubled home to come mentor somebody else and share time? I mean, we're all children of God. We all rest on the same cornerstone. How do we blend that together so that that we can recognize that we're potentially in a dysfunctional community when we ignore certain pillars that are falling apart?
Yeah, so I would say go out there and do something in your community. Just get involved. So like what Pastor Jeff was saying, for me, I went to the superintendent of our school district, which is just 6 miles away.
In a small town, which is where we live.
Yeah, and I said, hey, how can I help you? And he's like, well, what do you mean? And I said, we're out here at Jordan Ranch. We've been here for, 10 years. And I have a staff. Do you guys have like a mentoring program, where you help young adults? And he's like, yes. And I said, okay. I said, well, how can we help you in that process? What can we do for you? And the first thing he asked me was, how much is it going to cost me? And I said, sir, it's not going to cost you anything. I said, anything that we do, the ranch will pay for it, or the church will pay for it. And I said, I'll feed the kids every time that we come. My chef will make them food and we'll feed them. Because teenagers are always hungry, right? Mm-hmm. And so he said,
we're hungry.
Yeah, I know.
I'm hungry right now.
Yeah. And then the second thing he told me, he said, well, you can't talk about Jesus in the classroom. And I said, hey, that's not a problem. I said, we will be the hands and feet of Jesus. I don't have to talk to a young man and tell him, hey, this is 1 Corinthians 13:4 to teach him biblical principles. That's right. Because for most of these kids, they're single moms or they're single grandmothers, they don't have time to take them to church on Sunday. So when Jasenia and I walk in, we're the only church that they're going to see all week long. And so when I told him that, he said, you know what, I'll give you a classroom tomorrow. I'll give you 2 classrooms tomorrow. And I said, well, give me about a week, to organize everything and we'll go in. And so we just started going in and we started feeding the kids every time that we came, but we got in their boat. We got in their world. And so now, here's something I did. So all of my boys, I walked in with brand new black ties. And I said, how many of you gentlemen know how to tie a tie? Nobody raised their hand. These are all middle schoolers and high schoolers. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to give you a brand new tie, but in order for you to take it, you got to show me that you can tie it. So we taught them how to tie a tie. Only half the boys got it, right? But the half that got it, they walked out of that classroom with the tie all day long. Wow. The principal was calling me, the counselors were calling me, everybody was excited. The next week came, the rest of everybody learned how to tie a tie. They got their tie. But I asked the first half of the boys, when you left this classroom and you were walking around with your tie all day, how did it make you feel? And one of the young men stood up, his name's Javen. He said, Pastor Frank, he said, I felt like the boss all day long. And I said, Javen, that's how you should feel all the time. But if these young men don't have fathers at home, for us, tying a tie, that's basic. Every man should know how to do that. But if you don't have a father at home teaching you those basic things, then you're going to go through life not knowing those things. And that's a small thing.
Orphan spirit.
Yeah, it's having that orphan spirit.
I always talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and self-actualization being a real thing. And, being able to visualize yourself somewhere, but understanding that you can't do that unless those bottom pillars or parts of the pyramid are actually addressed. Those are those most basic needs that everyone has. And we talk about also how everything's connected. You guys are affecting change by not waiting for it to come to you through the ripple. You're actually going to the core of the problem, either at the school or at the home, to address the problem so that you can mitigate the ripple of things that are going to happen just for the sheer nature of the world that we live in. But we can also do things, as you said earlier, to be the change agent, okay? And not be that person, as I always say, the person in the peanut gallery, right? They're in the stands, they're always saying what's not happening, but they're not coming out on the field.
They're not practicing, are they?
No, they're not practicing at all. They're not.
I love my brother's a football coach for 34 years. He actually retires this year. Very successful program. And he says this. He said, the loudest people are always in the cheapest seats.
Yeah.
And that's what you're talking about. No, you can't worry about what they're saying. Is who's doing something. It's very minuscule of who's doing it. So if you're listening today, be a doer, not a hearer only, lest you deceive your own self. And men learn shoulder to shoulder. That's why they don't do good in church. They don't do good in classes. They want to go out and work. If you and I are working together, I can tell what kind of man you are by how hard you work. That's integrity. That's character. But we don't understand men because we're fatherless nation. And so that's one of the things that we were able to accomplish because we're doing it. We're not perfect. We make mistakes and we make adjustments like any team.
Yeah.
And we were able to pass just a few months ago in the state of Texas a chaplaincy program, and it is now legal to hire chaplains in the state of Texas and pay them $40,000, $50,000, $60,000. So these are for retired teachers, whoever really passes the deal. And that was not able to be done last year. Now we've opened it up to every school in the state of Texas to have a spiritual man with the ability to protect the children as well. And so we have a father figure that's a spiritual man in every school. All he does is walk the halls and make sure that he can identify kids that are challenged, and he can pray with you. Well, that took some doing it. Yeah. You can't just talk about it. Now we're going to train them, and some of the training will be done out here. But those are the things, and like you said, we've got hundreds of things like that in the works, but that was one that came through. If people say, what can I do in my community? Yes. That's why we have Manhood U. You need to come here and get under a father so that you can't be a great father until you're first a great son. Right? You got to have somebody to follow and set an example. We have competent fathers here all over the world, and they're coming in for these 4 sessions in a year at the ranch. So we'd love to have you come in.
It's so interesting because you even mentioned it in there, hey, we've got this law passed in the state, and that's awesome. And I hear what it is, and it just reminded me of something that, when you're talking about the cheap seats, and it's like it's so easy to throw an insult. It's so easy to say no. The heavy lift of hope is what people struggle with. Well, I don't want somebody to look at me, or I don't want them to stare at me, or why am I the only one? Why am I the only one standing up praying? Why am I, But we need you to be that person, because I promise you, if you're the first one to stand up, there'll be a second that will follow. And it's like that's what's missing, and it's so interesting. And the fact that you're in, and what we say when it comes to communities is you're in fertile ground. You have a state that understands that, they've endorsed that.
Yeah.
But it should be almost expected. It should be almost first nature. Like this is a spiritual thing, and so everything you're talking about goes back to the original being of what are we really doing here? Like okay, so get all the I go to the store, I get my stuff. At the end of the day, what are we really doing? We're here to serve. And there has to be a learning process to learn the importance of serving others and less about myself. And we all struggle with that, right? From time to time, you're like, I need this. And then you got to pause for a minute and say, wait a minute. How does that help me further the kingdom? And so this is a very interesting conversation along those regards. And so let me ask you this. I have this thing where I do like a 20-second challenge. So there's no trick question. Every answer is right. Nobody fails the test. But if you had 20 seconds, I'll start with you, Pastor, first. If you had 20 seconds to talk face-to-face to a parent who is dealing, let's say a single mom or a grandmother, and she's dealing with a lack of men in the family tree, and here's this son of hers who she wants to change this generation. You got 20 seconds to say something to him. How do you first approach that situation? How do you bring hope to a situation where she's almost hopeless, doesn't know what to do?
Well, when there is no man, you become the man. Period. And that's what we train. And no, we're not doing everybody, but it's a starfish theory. We are training this one. And your church, the pastor should be the spiritual father. Should be. And if he's not, you need a different church.
Yeah.
But that's how the process is supposed to go.
That's good.
The spiritual father, it should be there to answer her issues with her youth pastor, with him. But if it's not, then go find one, come to the ranch, see what we're doing, and then go back and imitate it. We have lots of men that do that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I ask you, go ahead.
Yeah, I actually was going to say something on, if it's a single mom trying to connect with her young son, take it back to Ephesians 5:33, where God commands men need respect and women need love. Okay. And I say this to single moms all the time. If you're trying to connect with your young son, then know that he, as a young man, he needs respect. You're trying to love on him, which is great. As men, we do need love, but first he needs respect. And so the one thing where women do this all the time, the one way they can disrespect us is when they interrupt us, right? So if you're talking, Kevin, I'm not going to say anything till you stop talking. And then if I'm talking, you're not going to say anything till I stop. That's how we respect each other verbally. Women interrupt each other all the time. That's how their brains are wired. You get a group of 10 women together, they're constantly talking and interrupting each other. Then they go home to their husbands, to their young sons, and they think they can talk to them the same way. But really what's happening is they ask their son, how are you doing? And he starts to tell his mom, well, she gets all excited because he's actually talking to her. And then she said, well, what happened here and what happened there? And what did your teacher say? Well, he feels disrespected, so he shuts down. And then he stops talking to her. So that would be my advice.
That's awesome.
Those are real. That's real. See, because here's the thing.
Yeah, all the men in the room are going, yeah.
Everybody can't see them saying, but that's the reality, and we all should either be saying amen or ouch. Yeah. Okay.
but Curtis and I we play these games all the time, and they're not real games; they're real questions. And sometimes they'll be like, "Why do you ask this question and give somebody 20 seconds?" Because what I've learned is if you tell somebody, "Hey, you really need to go do this," sometimes they think you're talking about someone else. But if you ask a question, or if I ask a question, Curtis, 20 seconds, whoever's watching right there, in their mind is thinking of, well, what would my answer be? And then you've just called them to do something. And so by you guys giving an answer, just like you're listening to his answer and you're coming up with your answer and you're thinking, what would I do if I had 20 seconds? That literally, that feeling in your gut, that's what you have to translate into action.
Sure.
And that's why we believe, at least what we've been trying to do is when we talk to people, and we have more conversations off camera and off mic than we do on, because our job is 95% of what we do, and this is 5% of what we do, but this is amongst the 5% of the most important of what we do at work. And we got to inspire people to do more than just say, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
And the thing we have to be candid about is that nothing moves forward without having real conversation, not this fluffy stuff. The stuff that everybody's okay with hearing, but those things that people need to hear, because those are the things that will get you critically thinking about, hopefully, yourself before you start to project out. Because we don't grow unless we handle and manage the tough things. That's what men do, and that's what godly men and women do. We challenge ourselves daily. We're put in different situations that aren't easy, but there's so much growth in them.
There is, and we are winding down on our podcast, and I know y'all are upset that it's ending, but probably excited to get on with the rest of your day, and we certainly appreciate your time. But some final thoughts, Pastor, just final message, a final thought of what we can do collectively, whether it's in Texas, whether it's in Alabama, every city and state in between. This is not just a local problem, but it begins locally and many times with the community. So what are some final thoughts?
Well, two quick things. One, to piggyback off what y'all just said, is speaking to pastors today. What if you could take this thought, this 20-second thought, and formalize it into your every message? And you got 4 messages a month. When was the last time you gave a charge to action at the end of the day where every person knew what you expected them to do? It's going to be crickets.
Right.
What if you put that into your message every week where you ask me, because now that I've heard you for 30, 40, 50, 60 minutes, now what do you want me to do with that? You're expecting me to figure it out. I'm not going to do it. The average guy is going to go back to Pizza Hut. That's it. What we want you to do is be profound and not prolonged. Say what you got to say in 25 minutes. Tell me what to do and let me go do it so I can experience it so I don't lose it.
That's right.
Right? If I don't use it. Second thing is there has to be an epicenter of anything. There has to be that place where people can come and learn. This is what we do. We do other things, but we do this very well because we focused on it. We do one thing great instead of many things good. Come see us at Jordan Ranch. Go online or whatever. We're not trying to convert you to our church. We're just trying to give you some things that you probably don't know, because we've had a lot of mistakes to learn all the things that we've learned. And we'll be more than happy to help you and your men's group to become relevant.
That's good.
That's good.
Yeah, my advice would be, get into your local school districts, get into your local schools. And because right now teachers are hurting, principals, assistant principals are hurting, and they all need help. So they don't want Jesus in the schools until things get really bad. As soon as it gets really bad, which is right now, then they'll take whatever you offer them. And so get in there, and even if it's just volunteering. I remember a couple of years ago I saw an article, I forget the city, but this school had like 20 fights in one day, and they arrested like 40 students, right? And so the local dads got together, and they just started volunteering. They started walking the hallways. You know, they showed up in the morning, and they would go in shifts, morning and afternoon, and they would just tell dad jokes to the kids, but just their presence stopped all of the fights within the school. So if we can just get involved as men, then a lot of the issues that we're seeing, we can solve those problems right then and there.
One last thing. We have... thank you, Frank. That was good. I think that's true. Schools are where we raise kids. Yeah. And they're a great place to touch the community. Speaking of that, it made me think about it, is if you desire to be a chaplain in a local school, we can help you with that. We start in Texas, but there's 17 other states that now have the right because it passed in Texas. They were waiting for us. Yeah. And so now that process is going on. But let's start with Texas. If you're in another state, give us a call and we'll tell you when yours is being lined up and what you can do. But just go to gfwatkins.org. That's our website, and then we'll help you with that.
That's great. That's great. Well, I'm going to talk to you about that myself. So, hey.
I appreciate it, Curtis. I don't know if you got a final thought to before we go, but
I just want to say this: what Pastor Jeff and Pastor Frank said is basically they're saying, charge to heal. You'll have the energy once you get there to fight. Yeah, but you've got to have the courage to go up the hill.
The need is a call. Yeah. That's right.
Well, and you got to do what makes sense, not the nonsense, and that's the thing. And by the way, we've all made mistakes. I had hair when I started making my mistakes. If it makes you feel any better, but I appreciate you guys so much, not only for being here, but for letting us be in your presence during this conversation. Yeah. It's more than an honor, more than I can describe, and I appreciate that. And that's Kevin talking, who just happens to be sitting in this chair during this podcast. So thank you for that.
We appreciate the opportunity.
We're going to, and I know the rest of our team that's behind the scenes here too will join me in this. We not only appreciate you, we'll be praying for the success and continued success. Here, because I know that you have to constantly be surrounded by that, and there's a lot of things out there trying to attack what's really working, and we see that, and we want to call it out for what it is, and we appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you.
So thank you again for being here, and to our viewers and our audience, thank you for tuning in for another episode of the EchoStop Live podcast. We'd love to hear your feedback at echostoplive@gmail.com. That's echostoplive@gmail.com. And if you are confused or curious or interested or not even sure, send us an email. We'd love to direct you to the right resources. We'll certainly have the information regarding all of the different things here so we can get you in contact with the right person, because we believe this is something that needs to cross the nation, not just cross a city or a county line. And so for all of us here at EchoStop, thank you again for joining with us. Stay safe, and we'll see you next Friday at 8:30 on the EchoStop Live podcast.